Local news that matters on Local 22 News.
At This Place in History, we're in Burlington with Executive Director of the Vermont Historical Society, Steve Perkins. Steve, what are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about serial killers today.
All right, kind of a dark subject.
It's a very
right?
dark subject, but you know, we're coming into the darker time of the year here. The days are a little bit shorter, so why not get into a little bit of our darker past? The person who was described as the first serial killer, or the first person that got the label serial killer in the United States, Dr. H.H. Holmes.
Okay, I happen to know a little bit about him. He wasn't born here. He was born in New Hampshire, right?
Yeah, right. He was born in Gilmanton, New Hampshire, and his name wasn't Henry Holmes. That was a name he assumed later, but his name was Herbert Mudgett. He decided to go into medicine, and so he enrolled at UVM. And he was at UVM for 1 year, living here in Burlington, ended up not staying at UVM, ended up going to the University of Michigan Medical School, where he did graduate, was a doctor, and then kind of the crime spree began.
So we're not at UVM. Why are we right here?
No, we're here because after the bulk of his killing sprees, he kind of went on the lam. And he came back to a city that he knew, which was Burlington. And he rented the house behind us, number 26, North Winooski Avenue. Stayed here kind of on and off for a short amount of time while he was running from insurance investigators and Pinkerton agents before he was eventually caught in Boston.
So you mentioned his most notorious spell of killings. That was in Chicago during the World's Fair.
During the
correct?
World's Fair. A great book, Eric Larson, Devil in the White City, which is a non-fictional account of both the World's Fair, but also H.H. Holmes, who built a pharmacy and a hotel kind of across the street from the World's Fair and turned it almost into, they called it a murder palace in the newspapers. But in addition to a serial killer, he was also a con man. He was married multiple times, a lot of like life insurance schemes.
And he was only convicted for one of the murders, correct?
One. And like I said, it was a murder, but it came out of a life insurance scheme. So he had met a guy named Benjamin Peitzler, who was from Philadelphia, and they decided that they would try to scam the insurance company. So he convinced Mr. Peitzler to take out a $10,000 insurance policy. We're talking 1893 right now, in Benjamin Peitzler's name, but naming H.H. Holmes as the beneficiary. The deal was they'd go find a cadaver, disfigure it, say it was Peitzler, and collect the money. Well, Holmes, being the guy that he was, instead just ended up killing Benjamin Peitzler and then collecting the money. Ultimately, Pinkerton detective and an insurance investigator tracked him here to Burlington, saw him at the Howard Opera House, which was a few blocks from here in Burlington. He ended up escaping and making his way to Boston a few days later. Ultimately, he was captured, brought to Philadelphia, where he was convicted of that one murder.
How did they link him to so many crimes?
So after he was captured, a lot of other kind of insurance companies were worried about, was he doing this with other people? And it brought to light this murder palace that he had in Chicago. They ended up raiding that place, and you know, they found human remains in the basement. It suspiciously burned from arson right after they raided it. And then when he was in prison, he was paid a large amount of money by the Hearst Corporation, Yellow News of the time, the 1890s, to tell his story. And he said that he did 27 of these murders. Historians and researchers over time have started to ascribe up to 200 murders. But
wow.
He was hung. He died 1894 in Philadelphia, but he stayed right here in Burlington while he was on the run.
At This Place in History.